You may not know this, but many of the popular whiskeys out there are not popular because of how good they are, but because of how much money the system makes off of them. And if you want to find out how you've been manipulated, then stick around. Before we get started, I have to take a moment to thank the patrons. We would not be able to produce this content without the financial support of individuals out there. And the reality is millions of people watch this show, but very few people contribute financially. And so we want to say thank you to all the patrons, especially the ones whose names are on the screen right now. They're contributing at the top 3 levels. So let's give you a little bit of background information about what I'm talking about. So there's actually not enough space for all the brands of whiskey out there on liquor store shelves, especially when you consider that most brands have multiple variations that they sell that we call SKUs. And if you really want your brand to rise to the top, you would probably think that it's because it's the best tasting or because it has the best quality price ratio or something like that. But as I've gotten to know the industry more on the industry side and not as a consumer, I've learned that that's turned out not to be true. So the things that influence consumers' purchasing behavior have a lot to do with decisions that get made behind the scenes. For instance, what shelf is your product on? So if you're a producer, you want your product on the top shelf. There's a reason why that term means something to us. You certainly don't want it on the bottom shelf. You don't want it separated from the rest of the products that are in that same spirit category, things like that. So product placement is a big deal. Then you have displays. And so products that are prominently displayed in walkways, in, for instance, the bourbon aisle or whatever, those things influence purchasing behavior. You have like endorsement shelf talkers is what they're called. So there's like a little piece of paper next to it where there's some sort of endorsement from either maybe a famous whiskey reviewer, sometimes employees that work at the liquor store. Those things influence people. Awards influence people. So you'll see that there's a bottle that's got a bunch of stickers on it that say that they won gold at this spirits competition or that spirits competition. And then in-store tasting. So whenever you walk into a store and they got a table set up and they go, hey, do you want to take a sample of this whiskey? All of those things influence consumer purchase behavior. Now, one of the most important ones is employee recommendations, right? And so if somebody comes in there, especially if they're buying a product for somebody else and they go, what do you have that, might be special or unique? I'm trying to get a gift for someone. Almost always, if an employee goes, oh, we've got this new whiskey and it's really awesome. Not everybody has it. You may want to check this out and get this, right? That has a really big impact. So those are some of the things that can influence consumer purchasing behavior. Now, let's talk about the environment in which these things can take place. So we operate inside the 3-tier system in the United States, which means that there's an individual who is licensed by the federal government and likely by their state to be a producer of spirits. And producers typically make about 35% margin on the products that they make. Now, real quick, I want to point out the difference between margin and markup, okay? Margin is when you divide by the percentage subtracted from 100, okay? Because what people think is 35% margin on a $100 bottle would be $100 times 1.35. But that's actually not the case. You would divide that $100 by 0.65, and if you do the math, margin is higher than markup, okay? In fact, 50% margin is 100% markup. So you can see how that scale works, right? So the producer has to sell their products to a distributor or wholesaler. And wholesalers, on average, make about 30% margin. So you'd be dividing whatever number it is by 0.7. And the wholesaler sells it to retailers, bars, and restaurants. And retailers typically make about a 30% margin. So let's talk about an example so that you can understand how these numbers work. If a bottle of whiskey costs $20 to produce, that company, the producer, is going to sell it for about $30.75 per bottle. Then the company that gets it, which is the wholesaler, usually has around $2 of what we call laid-in cost. And that's going to be the cost of transportation from getting the product from one place to another, and then paying the state excise taxes, whatever those happen to be in the state. So after they add the $2 to the $30.75 per bottle, they add their 30% margin, they are going to have a price for that same bottle of about $46.75. Then they sell it to a retailer, the retailer marks up their 30-point margin, and that bottle is going to end up on the shelves for somewhere around $66.99. So a bottle that costs $20 to produce ends up on the shelves for around $66.99. Now, if you look at the numbers, the producer made $10.75 on that bottle. The wholesaler made $14, and the retailer made $20.24. So that is the environment in which these factors are going to be influenced. Now, what I've learned is that someone has to be constantly working on the things that influence customers' behavior if you want your brand to be successful. And it's not enough just to get your product in the hands of the consumer, because the next time they walk in, they have to have a reason to rebuy that product besides that it's good, right? And there are a lot of factors that influence whether or not they're gonna buy something else that's new. Now, because the wholesaler is making 30%, they are actually supposed to be doing 3 jobs. They're supposed to handle the logistics of moving the whiskey around. So it's their job to get it from the producer's warehouse to their warehouse, and it's their job to get it from their warehouse to the various retail and bar and restaurant locations that are picking up that product. They are supposed to warehouse product, so they're supposed to keep inventory on hand so that when somebody wants to put in an order, they don't have to wait for shipping from the producer. And they are also supposed to handle promotions. In fact, in the state of Texas, it used to be illegal for a producer to go out and try to promote their brand to bars and restaurants and retailers unless their wholesaler was with them, because it is 100% the wholesaler's job to promote product. They're supposed to be doing the sales. But the problem is that they don't do that job, even though they're being paid for it. The reality is that wholesalers always have enough brands that have enough demand just based on the market recognition of that brand, that their salespeople can likely hit their sales goals without getting out there and busting their tail and trying to convince people to move things around on their shelves and all that stuff so that they can bring in a new product. And so what happens if you're a salesperson for one of these wholesalers and you can meet your minimum required goals without actually doing any difficult sales is you kind of just don't focus on that, right? And so then you've got a problem where the wholesaler's going, well, your product's not selling that well, right? And the retailer doesn't want to push your brand over other brands unless there's some sort of a profit incentive, right? And so both the wholesaler and the retailer will start putting pressure on the producer. Now remember, the producer made $10.75, the wholesaler made $14, and the retailer made over $20. They will put pressure on the producer to take some of that $10.75 and use it to increase the sales. And then the wholesaler and the retailer reaps those benefits even though they didn't have to pay the cost to make it happen, right? And so what ends up happening is the wholesaler goes, well, yeah, you're paying us 30 margin points, but if you really want our salespeople to focus on your brand, then you're going to have to come up with some sort of a bonus incentive schedule, right? And you go, well, are we going to get a discount on the 30 points that we're charging? And they go, oh, no, we're going to keep all of our normal margin. You're just going to pay our salespeople twice to do the job, right? And if you do that, you can get their salespeople, because if you're a salesperson and you can mostly meet your goals with call-in orders, which brands are you going to focus your attention on? Are you going to focus your attention on the brand that has a per case bonus this month? Or are you just going to focus your attention on some random brand, right? Well, you're probably going to focus on one that has a bonus. But what I've learned is that if you pay this ransom fee, if you will, after the store sells through the product, right about the time that you would hope that the retailer would put in a reorder and bring in more of your product, that salesperson that works for the wholesaler has a new incentive on a different product, and they need your shelf space so that they can get next month's bonus. And so it becomes a problem that if you ever pay the ransom, you have to keep paying ransoms, right? Otherwise, you're going to lose your spot. And so that is a very difficult way to grow your brand. Welcome back to Pretentious Whiskey Reviews. Today, we're evaluating the 1982 Pappy Van Winkle. Ooh. I'm detecting a hint of Bolivian virgin tears and West Indian grasses.
Y'all, you don't need all that crap. All you need is an American whiskey aroma kit from bourbonrealtalk.com. Developing your palate is a learned skill. Over time, you can train your taste buds without being a douchebag. Get yours today at bourbonrealtalk.com.
I'm also getting Indian nutmeg. Another way that you can get some sales support is if you do tastings for the retailer, right? But tastings can be very expensive, and so are the displays and things that make it easier for the retailer to make their money. And so what you can sometimes do is decide not to go with the wholesaler who charges the full 30%. And we're starting to get into the real matter behind this video. There are some wholesalers out there that basically only handle logistics, and they may charge only $5 per case to deliver that case to the store. So remember, in our scenario, the wholesaler was probably making $14 per bottle. There's 6 bottles in a case. So normally the wholesaler is getting 6 times 14, right? Which is $84. But there's another wholesaler out there that will only do it for $5 for that case, which turns out to be 83 cents per bottle. So if you do the math on that, if the retailer gets it for that much cheaper, instead of paying the $14, they pay 83 cents. The retailer also gets to make the extra $13.67 that the wholesaler was going to make, plus the $20.24 that they were already going to make, making their total profit $33.41. And on a $66.99 bottle, that turns out to be about a 50% gross profit margin, right? So they're making $33.41, and the producer only made $10.75. And so this setup is not possible in all states. Some states have regulated pricing. They make it so the wholesaler has to sell each product to every retailer for the same price, regardless how large they are. But in states that have really large retailers, a lot of times the retailers end up with this type of scenario, so that they have some products that they have a 50% margin on, and other products that they may only have a 15 or 20% margin on, because those producers are so big they've been able to squeeze their margins, right? So then we come to the case of Total Wine. So Total Wine does this very same thing, except they also are making money out of that $10.75 that the producer would have been paid. And basically, they're not allowed to own part of the brand. But what they can do is go to a friend and say, hey, start a brand and I will guarantee you success, because I am going to order all of these bottles and it's effectively going to be an exclusive product for Total Wine. In exchange for knowing that you're not ever going to have to produce any whiskey until you already have a PO coming, we are going to make it so that you're going to make like quite a bit less per bottle than you would normally make, but you're going to be okay because you don't have any risk. And then that's going to be sold to one of these logistics only wholesalers, and Total Wine is able to make a tremendous amount more money, even more than 50% gross profit margin on those quote unquote house brands, right? And so that is one of the reasons why you might go into a store and be told that you need to buy this product because it tastes just like Blanton's, right? And so if you are a producer and you're trying to figure out a way to be successful, right, you are either going to have to hire a salesperson that we call a brand rep that works directly for your brand, that's going out there and doing the sales for your wholesaler. They're doing the merchandising for the retail location. They'll go out there, check the shelves. If you need more inventory in your shelves, they'll go in your back warehouse, they'll pick out bottles, they'll fill the shelves back up, they'll ask you if you want to put in an order, and they'll send a message to your wholesale rep and say, hey, this store needs to put in another order for this case of this or this case of that. So you're gonna have to spend, $80,000 to $120,000 a year on a salesperson to go out there and represent your brand, even though you've already paid somebody else for that, right? Or you're gonna have to find some other way to collect money up. And what the most common solution to that problem is that producers just don't make money until they're enormous. And so when you hear these stories about brands that came on the scene and they grew real big and then they sold out to a large conglomerate, that was probably their goal the whole time. They were probably losing money all up until the point that they sold to the conglomerate, and they were doing so that they could grow distribution and volume and then hand that over to somebody else who had cheaper ways to bring that product to the market, and they were able to monetize on the sales potential of that brand. And so consumers might think that market demand for a bourbon is the push to popularity, but the truth is the market is more heavily influenced by how much money the producer can bring to the table to promote on behalf of the wholesalers and retailers, or how much margin they can offer to the wholesaler or retailer. And that is what influences purchasing behavior. So hopefully you learned something today. We're gonna give away some whiskey. What I thought we'd do is I'd give away some whiskey of some brands that you may know about, but they're the ones that are fighting this battle on the front lines because they're large enough that they have wide distribution, but they're not so large that they can afford to have a market rep in every single major market. And so these are the guys that are out there slugging it out. And we're gonna have 5 1-ounce sample winners. You're gonna get a Barrel Craft Spirits 036, a Sagamore single barrel that I picked out, a Old Scout single barrel that I picked out, a Heaven's Door single barrel that I picked out, and a Pursuit United bottle your own experience that I picked out when I was there. And so these are the kinds of brands that are fighting this uphill battle. And all you have to do to enter to win is like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, which will notify you of future content pieces and future giveaways. And most importantly, you have to go to the video description on YouTube and fill out the web form that says free giveaway. We run a randomizer, post the results publicly online, reach out to the winners, get your address, and ship your samples absolutely for free. And if you like this content and you want to support the channel, there are 3 ways. We have Patreon, which we mentioned in the beginning. We have a merchandise site at bourbonrealtalk.com with merchandise curated for whiskey people by whiskey people. And last but not least, I'm a residential real estate agent in Houston and Dallas. And if you need service in either of those markets, please reach out to me. There are links for all 3 ways to support the channel in the video description on YouTube. And if this is your first time tuning in, I'd love to tell you about our philosophy. We are about bringing people together around whiskey. Whiskey is a great conduit that helps people make connection. And connection is something that's important to me because I lost a loved one to suicide that was missing some connection in his life. And it made me think maybe if I could get you connected to whiskey, the whiskey would do the rest of the job and get you connected to others. So we started this channel, but if there's going to be connection, you do have to have a forum for people to meet each other. And we started Bourbon Real Talk Community, which is a free Facebook-based whiskey enthusiast community. Lots of great things going on in there. We were able to do a lot of nonprofit work. We ended up starting our own nonprofit called livestayproject.org. And that's all administered inside the whiskey world. So really that's our philosophy. That's what we think whiskey is all about, is caring for others and using this brown liquid as a reason to get to know each other. And we did learn a valuable lesson as we started looking at enthusiast forums and how to get people to interact. And that was that there is some negativity out there online from people who show hate to strangers. And they taught us that if someone can hate a stranger online, there's nothing that keeps us from loving a stranger online. And that's why we end every video the same way, and that's this. If you woke up this morning, you're unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that we love you. We'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk.